Goblins, welcome back to a new year. Hope you had a fantastic holiday. For us it was okay, but I was ill throughout most of it, and I'm still on the back end of it right now. But anyway, today we're going to be discussing Chinese motorcycles. Now I know I poo-poo on them quite a lot, and there's a really good reason for that. But in today's video we're actually going to discuss why they are so important for the motorcycle industry. So let's jump on. Let's go. Yeah, my first motorcycle was a Chinese bike, my first proper bike, and I did not have a very good experience with it. It was a Lifan 125. It was styled like the Honda CBF 125 because most Chinese motorcycles are clones of the Japanese ones. And yeah, it was not great. And this is before I knew anything about anything to do with motorcycles. But I knew it was a bad bike. It broken down a number of times on me for no good reason, and ever since then I've been like, I'm not buying a Chinese motorcycle ever again. However, I don't know if I would have been able to get into motorcycles as cheaply as I did if it wasn't for that motorcycle. But it was so unreliable that I didn't even use it for my motorcycle test. I actually used one of the bikes that the training school had instead to do the test, because I mean it was a Honda that there were Hondas that they had. So, but these days a lot of the training schools use Chinese bikes as well. So that is another thing to consider here in today's video. But look, the thing is, as much as I heavily encourage all of you to never buy a Chinese motorcycle, the thing is, they do play a massive part of the industry for new riders, mainly because they are usually the cheapest option and the cheapest way to get involved in riding bikes to begin with. But they also keep the rest of the competition on their toes. When you get a Chinese motorcycle that is so much cheaper than what the Japanese brands have to offer, well, it really does entice you to buy one, and it means that all the Japanese brands have to keep their prices as competitive as possible to even compete with the Chinese offerings. And the thing is, 125s in general are not that reliable. Alright, they may last 15-20,000 miles. You do get some on the market that are over that, they're 25k, 30k, but you're really pushing their lifespan at that point. Most Chinese bikes, if not all Chinese bikes, they won't last 15,000 miles. So if you are going to buy a Chinese motorcycle, make sure it is well under 10,000 miles, and you should be okay for a number of years, depending on the mileage that you plan to actually put on the bike. But that's the thing, guys. That is the best, well, I say the best, the cheapest way to get into motorcycles. They're really cheap on insurance. If they get stolen, then it's not really a big deal. Yeah, it sucks, but more often than not, you're going to be paying less than $1,000 for a Chinese 125, a used Chinese 125. Gosh, blimey, the roads are so greasy today. I'm glad I got these decent tires on this bike today, on the Ninja 125. But yeah, I mean that's the thing. When you buy a 125, you don't really intend to ride it for that long. You know, if you ride it for more than 2 years, I'd be surprised, because within that time you should have passed your motorcycle test, and then you'd be on to bigger and better things at that point. But if your plan is to ride a 125 for longer than 2 years, buy a Japanese. Simple as that. But if you are buying a Chinese motorcycle because you want to get your test done as quickly as possible, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that scenario. They're absolutely perfect for that, because you don't need them to be mega reliable over a number of years, over a load of mileage. You don't need them to be reliable over a lengthy period of time. Whereas with the Japanese bikes, that's what you'd expect. You know, you'd expect them to be that good over a longer period of time. Now, we are going to be taking some dual carriageways in today's video. I kind of want to try and get away from the routes that I normally take, so we'll see where this takes us. But we are getting into the late afternoon now. It's about 3:30, 4 o'clock now, so it's going to get dark really soon. So it might be the only video that we actually get to shoot today, unfortunately. I was late coming out. But yeah, Chinese bikes, the thing is, there's loads of them out there as well. The more of these bikes that are out there, the cheaper they're going to be, because the harder it is for the sellers to actually push them. And that is another issue that you will find with Chinese bikes, is when you've got it, is selling it on afterwards, you're going to find it significantly more difficult to pass on a Chinese motorcycle. It's not impossible, but you really do have to price them quite competitively, even if it's a low mileage one that has never been dropped. But speaking of a motorcycle that's never been dropped, that is you're very unlikely to find a 125 that has never been dropped. So what's the point in buying a nice Japanese one when, you know, you could buy a Chinese bike that's been dropped a few times and it still works perfectly fine, so you don't need it to be pretty. And that was exactly the same thing that I had with mine. I dropped mine at least twice, I can't even remember. And this was, yeah, back in 2008, 2009, something like that. Yeah, dropped it at least twice. Who cares? It doesn't, yeah, it sucks, alright? When dropping a motorcycle is never a good experience to have, but at least it wasn't a nice bike like this. And so there is, again, if it's just a throwaway motorcycle, then why not? Why not let it be Chinese? And that's the thing, a lot of the time it doesn't matter if it's not as reliable or as fun or as fast or as good looking as a Japanese offering, but it really doesn't matter. When you think about it practically, buying a Chinese motorcycle is, in a lot of scenarios, one of the best options that you can actually have if you're looking to do your test as quickly as possible. So it's, and to get that experience up as well, they're really good for that. The problem that I have with a lot of Chinese bikes though is that the experience that you get isn't going to be the same as a Japanese one, not just in terms of power, but in terms of braking reliability as well. The braking systems on Japanese bikes is second to none, and I would trust this Kawasaki Ninja in an emergency braking situation over a Chinese offering every time. And I'd love to actually test that theory out. If a Chinese 125 can keep up in terms of braking performance than the Ninja 125. That would be a very interesting test to have. Doing the same speeds, doing an emergency brake on both bikes, and which one actually does better. But I would bet every time that the Ninja 125 is going to be better in that scenario than a Chinese 125. Well, any Honda, any Japanese 125 is going to perform better in terms of braking distances, in my opinion. And that's also another thing to mention as well, the tyres that these bikes come with. The Japanese ones, the tyres are so much better. They're branded, they are tyres that you can recognize, that are trusted, that are reliable, whereas Chinese motorcycle tyres aren't as great. You know, that's something else to consider. The chains aren't going to be as good either, although most of the time Japanese brands are also using Chinese made chains anyway. But, you know, maybe quality control is a little bit better, who knows, but you know, there are all these little things that you might want to consider before buying a Chinese motorcycle. However, if you're looking at a 125 from Honda, from Yamaha, from Kawasaki, that is from the mid-2000s, and you're also comparing that to a Chinese motorcycle that is from 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, that is a really difficult choice to make, because even though the Chinese motorcycle is newer, you expect the Japanese one to last you a lot longer. But at that point, you know, you could toss a coin to determine which one is going to be more reliable. So that's the thing. If you're going to buy a Chinese 125, it has to be newer. If you're going to buy a Japanese one, if you can afford a Japanese one that is from 2015 onwards, then you won't have any problems whatsoever. But as soon as you're looking 10 years old, even on the Japanese side of things, because like I said, 125s aren't made to be all that reliable, because they're made really cheaply from every brand. You know, you expect the Japanese ones to be a little bit better built, but even so, their lifespan is minimal compared to bigger bikes. Even the likes of 250s, 300s are built much better than 125s are. So, should you buy a Chinese motorcycle? Yes, you absolutely should. Even though they are probably going to break down on you, even if it's a new one, or a newer one, they're probably going to break down on you. But it doesn't matter. I mean, the main thing for me is I don't want anyone getting put off by having a bad experience on a motorcycle. Because you buy a Chinese motorcycle unknowing, you know, not knowing that it's Chinese to begin with, because it looks like a Japanese one. And you have a bad experience on it, it makes you think, oh great, all motorcycles are going to be like that, aren't they? Whereas that's actually not the case. You will get problems with older bikes, as everyone does. That's just kind of the nature of how these things go. They wear out over time. You are going to get problems with older Japanese ones as well as newer Chinese ones. But I want everyone's experience on a motorcycle to be perfect, and I know that's not always going to be the case. But if you find a newer Chinese bike that hasn't done a lot of mileage, maybe has been dropped once or twice, and it's cheap, as long as it's got a long MOT on it and it's been serviced, then you shouldn't have a problem. But again, that's the thing, the Chinese made bikes, it's 50-50. Even the new ones, it's 50-50 whether or not you're going to have a good experience on one or a bad experience on one. Whereas with Japanese bikes, it's more like 90-10. You know, 10% of the bikes you're going to have a bad issue with newer ones, and then obviously, I mean, the reliability of them will drop off as they age. But that's the thing, they are more likely to live longer lives than a Chinese bike, much more likely. But that's the thing, if you're not looking to have it for that long, who cares, honestly, who cares? And I mean, the last video that we did of 2023, it was a live show, and one of our viewers, Dubstar Gaming, long time supporter of the channel, you are an awesome dude. He did have an R125, who unfortunately it crashed, and he's been out of the game for the vast majority of this year. And he did say on the live show that he bought a new bike and I wasn't going to like it, and he said it was a Lex Moto, and I was like, doesn't matter, man. The main thing is that you're on a bike again, and you're getting that experience. You're able to continue your riding career, which most people after a crash, they wouldn't even bother jumping on a bike ever again. You know, it's quite sad, really, but that is the way it goes. And it doesn't matter that it's a Chinese bike, especially if in the next year or two you're going to be doing your test anyway, you're going to be doing your mod 1, your mod 2. It doesn't matter, you won't be having it for that long anyway, and as long as it runs good, it stops good, it doesn't matter, honestly. It's the bigger picture here, you know. It doesn't matter. But concluding this video, guys and gals, if you are going to buy a Chinese motorcycle, then try and keep it over a shorter period of time. Try not to push it past maybe a few years, because that's when you might have to start investing quite a significant amount of money into it to keep it going, and it might not necessarily be worth it. But if you do plan on riding for a longer period of time on a 125, say more than 3 years, then buy a Japanese one. It'll be a better investment over the longer term, and you shouldn't have to invest as much money in it to keep it running. I mean, the biggest issues with the Chinese bikes are going to be the engines, and on the Chinese ones, even the European ones, the engines are significantly better built than the Chinese ones. The quality control is going to be a hell of a lot better. So it's a no-brainer. If you plan on riding a 125 for any length of time over 3 years, then buy a Japanese one. But I will kind of say that the older a Japanese bike gets, the more likely it's going to have issues. But definitely check out our video on our used buying guide for 125cc motorcycles. It's on the Wifey's Ninja 125. And if you are looking to buy one, then hopefully that video will give you everything you need to know about what to look out for and to make sure that you're actually buying yourself a good one. So definitely go and check that one out. But that'll be it for the first video of 2024. Thank you ever so much for joining us in the new year. Honestly, it means the world to us, and honestly, there's so much I want to do this year. Yeah, it's going to be a good year this year. I feel it. It's going to be a fantastic year. So thank you ever so much for everyone joining us on the ride, and we will catch you all in the next video. Don't forget to leave a like and hit that subscribe button, and we will see you in the next one.